Last September, something happened that changed everything. Not a medical error, not some rare genetic condition that had been missed, complete ignorance. A cardiologist with 17 years of experience, over 2,400 cardiac procedures performed, published research, lectures at medical conferences, and lives saved in the ER at 3 a.m. when every second counted, all of that expertise became completely irrelevant in a single moment. A phone call came at 7:22 a.m. The voice on the other end was strained in a way never heard before. Dizziness, a racing heart, a feeling that something wasn't right. Now context matters. This was someone who never complained, someone who grew up in a generation where you tough things out, where you don't call the busy doctor unless something is genuinely wrong. But that call was dismissed. The response was what any cardiologist might say to a parent who just woke up feeling off. Probably nothing. Your heart's just adjusting to being awake. Sit down, drink some water, take some deep breaths. It'll pass. Confidence in that diagnosis was so complete that the thought of calling an ambulance never even crossed anyone's mind. 48 minutes later, a different phone call came. A voice screaming into the phone, collapse in the kitchen, lips turning blue, no pulse detectable. The ambulance arrived in 6 minutes. The paramedics worked for 12 minutes before they got a stable rhythm back. 12 minutes. What goes through your mind when you're a cardiologist and someone tells you a loved one's heart stopped for 12 minutes? Every worst-case scenario ever studied suddenly has a familiar face on it. Every statistic becomes personal. Every percentage becomes a prayer. At the hospital, standing in the ER in a white coat with all those credentials and all that experience, there was nothing but helplessness, a spectator in the most important moment of life. After stabilization, the ER doctor asked one simple question that changed everything. What were they doing this morning before the symptoms started? No one had any idea. A phone call was made. The morning routine was walked through with the precision of someone who'd watched the same pattern unfold for months. Nothing unusual, just what happens every day. Same thing for the past 8 months. And that's when it hit like a freight train. The normal routine wasn't the problem. The timing of that normal routine was a ticking time bomb that had finally detonated. The morning danger zone. What happens to your body at dawn? To understand why certain morning behaviors can be deadly, you first need to understand what happens to your body the moment you open your eyes in the morning. Your body doesn't turn on like a light switch, it detonates. First, the cortisol spike. Your circadian rhythm triggers a massive release of cortisol, the stress hormone. Within 15 minutes of waking, your cortisol levels spike by 50 to 60%. This isn't a gentle wake-up call. This is your body slamming the accelerator, forcing your heart rate up and constricting your blood vessels with force. Second, the autonomic shift. Your autonomic nervous system shifts violently from parasympathetic mode, rest and digest, to sympathetic mode, fight or flight. Adrenaline floods your system like a tsunami. Your blood pressure shoots up by 10 to 20 points in a matter of minutes, sometimes more. Third, dehydration. After 7 to 8 hours without drinking anything, you're severely dehydrated. Your blood has become thick and viscous, like honey instead of water. Your heart has to work 3 times harder to pump this sludge through your body. Now imagine a heart that's already been beating for 60, 70, or 80 years facing this morning storm. Arteries that are naturally less elastic with age, blood vessels that don't respond as quickly, a cardiovascular system that's been working non-stop for decades. And then imagine adding behaviors on top of this biological storm that amplify the stress even further. That's what happened. That's what millions of people do every single morning without realizing they're playing Russian roulette with their cardiovascular system. Mistake number 1, jumping out of bed. Immediately. The first deadly mistake is something 87% of people do without even thinking about it. Jumping out of bed the second the alarm goes off. The alarm sounds, eyes open, and immediately, like responding to a fire alarm, legs swing over the side of the bed and standing happens. Motion begins before the brain is even fully conscious. It seems efficient, it seems disciplined, it seems like what productive people do. But for people over 60, this simple movement can trigger something called orthostatic hypotension, a sudden catastrophic drop in blood pressure that can cause falls, fainting, and in extreme cases, fatal cardiac arrhythmias. The physiology. When you've been lying down for 8 hours, your blood is distributed evenly throughout your body. Gravity isn't pulling it anywhere, it's in equilibrium. The second you stand up abruptly, gravity suddenly pulls up to 1 liter of blood down into the veins of your legs and abdomen. 1 full liter. That's a massive redistribution of your blood volume in seconds. Your heart suddenly has much less blood to pump to your brain, and your brain needs constant blood flow to function. It can't store oxygen like muscles can. Every single second without adequate blood flow starts killing brain cells. In young people, pressure sensors called baroreceptors detect this drop instantly and tell the heart to beat faster to compensate. The response is so fast, you don't even notice the adjustment happening. But with age, these sensors become slower and less sensitive. They're like smoke detectors with dying batteries. There's a lag between the drop in pressure and the compensatory response. And during that lag, your brain doesn't get enough oxygen. Dizziness, blurred vision, stars, weak legs, and in the worst cases, fainting and collapse. The overcorrection danger. The danger goes far beyond the fall itself. When your body finally realizes what's happening, when those slow baroreceptors finally sound the alarm, it panics. It overcorrects. Your nervous system releases a massive surge of adrenaline to jack your blood pressure back up. Your heart goes from struggling to pump enough blood to suddenly being forced to pump against extremely high pressure. This creates something called reflex tachycardia. Your heart starts beating fast and violently, like an engine being revved from idle to maximum RPM in seconds. And this sudden violent acceleration can trigger fatal arrhythmias in a heart that's already under stress from the morning hormonal storm, ventricular fibrillation, sudden cardiac arrest, dead before you hit the floor. The solution: when your alarm goes off, stay lying down for 30 to 60 seconds. Take 5 deep breaths. Let your body know there's no emergency. Then sit up slowly and sit on the edge of the bed with your feet on the floor for another 60 seconds. Move your ankles in circles to activate the muscle pumps in your calves that help push blood back up to your heart. Only then do you stand up slowly. Those 2 extra minutes could be the difference between a normal morning and an ambulance at your door. Mistake number 2, not drinking water. Immediately upon waking, the second deadly mistake is almost no one thinks about: not drinking water immediately upon waking. Most people go straight for coffee, others head to the bathroom, others grab their phone and start scrolling. They completely ignore that their body has spent 8 hours losing fluids through breathing and perspiration. Every breath you take releases moisture. Every hour of sleep, your body loses water. By the time you wake up, you're in a state of significant dehydration. The physiology: this creates what's called hemoconcentration. Your blood volume decreases, but the number of red blood cells, white blood cells, and platelets stays the same. The result: blood that becomes thick, sticky, and dangerously prone to clotting. Imagine trying to pump honey through narrow pipes instead of water. That's what your heart is dealing with every morning when you don't hydrate immediately. It has to generate much more pressure to push thick blood through your arteries and capillaries. This dramatically increases the workload on your heart at precisely the moment when it's already under maximum stress from cortisol and adrenaline. The clotting danger. But thick blood isn't just hard to pump, it's dramatically more prone to forming the blood clots that cause heart attacks and strokes. When blood is thick, platelets become stickier. They clump together more easily. They're like magnets being pushed closer together, and if there's any damage or instability in the plaque inside your coronary arteries, these sticky platelets pile up at the site, forming a clot that can grow until it completely blocks the artery. This is literally how most heart attacks happen. A blood clot forms on top of an unstable plaque and cuts off blood flow to part of the heart muscle. And it's no coincidence that most heart attacks occur in the early morning hours between 6 a.m. and noon, when blood is at its thickest and stickiest. The statistics: the risk of heart attack is 40% higher in the morning than at any other time of day. The risk of stroke is 49% higher in the morning. Why? Because of this perfect storm. Thick blood from dehydration, elevated cortisol, spiking adrenaline, and increased blood pressure all happening simultaneously. The solution: leave a glass of water on your nightstand before bed. Make drinking 300 to 400 milliliters of room temperature water your absolute first priority when you wake up, before your phone, before the bathroom, before coffee, before anything else. This simple habit immediately begins to reverse the hemo concentration. Within minutes, you're diluting your blood, making it more fluid, reducing the viscosity, lowering the load on your heart, decreasing the risk of clots forming. In a matter of minutes, you're literally diluting the danger. Mistake number 3, drinking strong coffee on an empty stomach. The third mistake is something 80% of people think is absolutely necessary to function: drinking strong coffee, especially espresso or very concentrated coffees, on a completely empty stomach right after waking up. This is a cardiovascular bomb disguised as a comforting morning ritual. The physiology: caffeine is a powerful stimulant. It triggers a massive release of adrenaline from your adrenal glands. It accelerates your heart rate significantly. It causes vasoconstriction, narrowing your blood vessels, and spiking your blood pressure suddenly and intensely. Now remember, your body is already dealing with elevated cortisol, thick blood from dehydration, and the abrupt transition from sleep to wakefulness. Your cardiovascular system is already running at maximum capacity. Adding a caffeine shock on top of this is like throwing gasoline on a fire that's already burning out of control. For young people with elastic arteries and healthy hearts, this might be tolerable. The body can handle the additional stress. But for a cardiovascular system that's worked for 6, 7, or 8 decades, with naturally stiffer arteries and potentially undiagnosed coronary disease, this combination can trigger dangerous arrhythmias, severe hypertensive crises, or even sudden heart attacks. The empty stomach factor. When you drink coffee on an empty stomach, the absorption is dramatically accelerated. There's no food to slow it down. Caffeine hits peak blood concentration in your bloodstream in just 15 to 20 minutes instead of the 30 to 60 minutes it would take if you had food in your stomach. This creates what can be called a caffeine shock. Your cardiovascular system is instantly bombarded with a stimulant at precisely the moment when it's most vulnerable. Blood pressure can spike by 20 to 40 points within minutes. Heart rate accelerates to potentially dangerous levels, and your body enters a state of cardiovascular hyperexcitability where any additional stress, any sudden movement, any emotional trigger can push you over the edge into arrhythmia or cardiac event. The research: case studies exist of patients who had heart attacks within 30 minutes of drinking strong coffee on an empty stomach. Their autopsies showed coronary disease that had been building for years. The coffee didn't cause the disease, but it was the trigger that caused an unstable plaque to rupture and form the clot that killed them. The solution: if you cannot imagine a morning without coffee, never drink it on an empty stomach. Always eat something first. Even if it's just a banana, a handful of nuts, or a piece of toast, something to slow the absorption and reduce the concentration. If you normally drink espresso, switch to regular coffee. If you drink 3 cups, reduce to 1. And most importantly, drink at least 300 to 500 milliliters of water before you even think about coffee. Hydrate first, always. Mistake number 4, intense exercise in the first hours after waking. The fourth mistake is something many people do thinking it's incredibly healthy: intense exercise in the first few hours after waking up. Running, weightlifting, high-intensity interval training, spinning classes, any activity that drastically raises your heart rate when your body hasn't fully adapted to being awake. Let's be clear, exercise is fundamental for cardiovascular health. It's one of the most important things you can do to prevent heart disease, but timing is absolutely critical, especially for people over 60. The physiology. Remember, in the early morning hours, your cardiovascular system is already facing multiple simultaneous stresses: elevated cortisol, spiking adrenaline, thick blood from dehydration, naturally higher blood pressure, and stiff blood vessels that haven't warmed up yet. Adding intense exercise at this moment is like asking an engine that's already redlining to shift into an even higher gear. Your heart, which is already working in overdrive just to maintain basic function during the morning transition, suddenly needs to pump vastly more blood to active muscles. Oxygen demand skyrockets to levels that may be impossible to supply adequately, especially if there's any underlying coronary disease. The fasting exercise danger. The situation becomes even more dangerous when people exercise while fasting and dehydrated. Many people wake up, throw on workout clothes, and head straight to the gym or out for a run without eating or drinking anything. Intense exercise while fasting forces the body to break down muscle tissue for energy. It releases additional stress hormones, particularly cortisol, adding even more fuel to the fire. It can cause dangerous drops in blood sugar that further burden the heart and brain. Combined with thick, dehydrated blood that can't transport oxygen adequately, you're creating perfect conditions for cardiovascular collapse. The statistics. Many cases of sudden death in gyms or during morning runs happen for exactly this reason. Apparently healthy people who thought they were doing something good for their bodies, who didn't know they were stacking multiple risk factors in a potentially lethal combination. The solution: if you want to exercise in the morning, wait at least 2 to 3 hours after waking. Give your body time to fully transition from sleep to wakefulness. Drink plenty of water. Eat something light to stabilize blood sugar and provide energy. Allow morning cortisol and adrenaline to normalize before adding the additional stress of physical exertion. Always start with a very gradual and prolonged warm-up. Never go from 0 to intense in minutes. Consider moving your most intense exercise sessions to mid-morning, afternoon, or early evening when your cardiovascular system is more stable and better equipped to handle the demand. Mistake number 5: cold water exposure. Immediately after waking, the fifth and most devastating mistake is something wellness influencers and biohacking gurus promote as the holy grail of longevity. It's something adopted because of a genuine desire to be healthier, something read about in articles and watched in videos, something done religiously every single morning for 8 months before it almost killed someone. Taking an ice-cold shower or any form of extreme cold exposure immediately after waking up. The wellness industry's blind spot. Morning cold exposure is being massively promoted on social media by influencers who have absolutely no understanding of the specific cardiovascular risks for older adults. Viral videos show 25-year-old athletes taking ice baths at sunrise. Millions of views, thousands of comments saying, "I'm going to try this tomorrow." People in their 60s and 70s watch these videos and think, if they can do it, I should be able to do it too. But what works for a young athlete with elastic arteries, low baseline blood pressure, and no cardiovascular disease can be literally lethal for someone over 60 with decades of cardiovascular wear, borderline blood pressure, or asymptomatic coronary disease they don't even know they have. The wellness industry has created a dangerous culture where more extreme always equals better, where pushing your body to uncomfortable limits is always beneficial, where if something is is difficult and shocking to your system, it must be making you stronger. But aging bodies don't work that way. They require different approaches that work with your physiology, not against it. Approaches that respect the reality of decades of accumulated cardiovascular stress. The physiology of cold shock. When your body is exposed to extreme cold, especially cold water directly on your torso, it interprets this as a direct threat to survival. Your body immediately activates every emergency mechanism available to preserve core body temperature and protect vital organs. In seconds, something called massive peripheral vasoconstriction occurs. Thousands of small blood vessels in your skin and extremities slam shut simultaneously. Not gradually, not gently. They close like floodgates slamming shut in a flood. Imagine your cardiovascular system as a network of pipes carrying water under pressure. Suddenly, thousands of the smaller pipes close completely. All that blood that was flowing through those vessels now has nowhere to go. The pressure in the remaining open vessels, the main circuit, instantly explodes. The blood pressure spike. Studies show that cold water immersion can raise systolic blood pressure by 20 to 40 points in seconds. But for people with already elevated pressure or a compromised cardiovascular system, these numbers can be even more extreme. Some studies have documented spikes of 50 to 60 points. For a heart that's been beating for decades and arteries that are naturally less elastic with age, this sudden, massive increase in pressure is catastrophic. It's like trying to inflate an old, dried-out balloon too fast. The rubber has lost its elasticity. It can't stretch to accommodate the pressure. The risk of rupture is extremely high. Whether it's an unstable plaque in a coronary artery that ruptures and causes a sudden heart attack, or a weakened blood vessel in the brain that bursts and causes a hemorrhagic stroke. The oxygen demand crisis. But cold shock doesn't just spike blood pressure to dangerous levels, it also forces the heart to work with brutal intensity. To overcome the massive cardiovascular resistance created instantly, to pump blood through thousands of constricted vessels against skyrocketing pressures, the heart must beat harder and faster, much harder, much faster. Oxygen demand skyrockets to levels that may be impossible to meet, especially if there's silent coronary artery disease, which is extremely common in people over 60. Most people have some degree of coronary disease and don't even know it because it hasn't caused symptoms yet. When the heart is forced into this extreme level of oxygen demand, and the coronary arteries can't deliver enough oxygen-rich blood to meet that demand, the result is severe myocardial ischemia. The heart muscle is literally suffocating. The arrhythmia trigger. This is where the most dangerous arrhythmias develop, especially ventricular fibrillation. The heart's electrical system becomes completely destabilized by the lack of oxygen. Instead of beating in a coordinated rhythm, it simply quivers chaotically. No blood is pumped to the brain. No blood is pumped to the rest of the body. This is cardiac arrest. And if not reversed within minutes with a defibrillator, it's fatal. The warning signs that were ignored. There had been warning signs in the weeks before the collapse. Strange palpitations during cold showers, moments of dizziness, brief chest discomfort. But these were interpreted as signs that the body was adapting, getting stronger, building resilience, not as urgent warnings that the system was being pushed beyond safe limits. The discomfort was thought to be the price of improvement. It was wrong. The solution: if you're over 60, avoid extreme cold exposure completely, especially in the first few hours after waking when your cardiovascular system is already under maximum stress. If you genuinely want the potential benefits of cold exposure, and there are legitimate benefits for some people, implement them gradually and safely over many months. Start with lukewarm water, not cold. Reduce temperature by just 1 degree per week. Always direct cold water to your extremities first, your feet and hands, never starting with cold jets directly on your chest or head. And most importantly, if you feel any cardiovascular symptoms at all, palpitations, dizziness, chest pain, shortness of breath, or unusual fatigue, stop immediately and seek medical evaluation. These are not signs of adaptation. They're warning sirens that you're in danger. The 5-minute morning protection protocol. Here is the protocol that transformed how mornings are started, the protocol that went from being a suggestion to a non-negotiable routine. Step 1, the awakening minute, 000 to 100. When the alarm goes off, stay lying down. Resist every urge to jump out of bed and start your day immediately. The instinct is strong. It feels like wasting time. It's not. It's saving your life. Breathe deeply and slowly. Inhale through your nose for 4 seconds. Hold gently for 4 seconds. Exhale slowly through your mouth for 6 seconds. Longer. Exhale, then inhale. Repeat this breathing pattern 5 times. This controlled breathing sends a powerful signal to your nervous system that there's no emergency. It helps modulate the cortisol and adrenaline release that's already happening. You're giving your cardiovascular system a gentle, gradual wake-up instead of an abrupt shock that forces it into crisis mode. Step 2, the hydration minute, 1 o'clock to 2 o'clock. Before going to sleep, leave a large glass of room temperature water on the nightstand, at least 300 to 400 milliliters. Not cold water from the fridge, room temperature. In this second minute, sit up slowly on the edge of the bed with your feet flat on the floor. Don't stand yet, just sit. Now drink all of that water, every drop. This immediately begins reversing the nighttime hemo concentration. Your blood becomes more fluid within minutes. You're removing a massive load from your heart's workload. You're literally diluting the danger, thinning the blood that had become dangerously sticky during the night. Step 3, the adjustment minute, 2 to 3. Stay sitting on the edge of the bed for another full minute. Don't stand up yet. 1 more minute won't make you late, but standing up too soon could be dangerous. While sitting, make gentle circular movements with your ankles, 10 circles in one direction, then 10 circles in the other direction. This activates the muscle pumps in your calves that help push blood back up toward your heart, fighting against gravity. This minute allows your baroreceptors, those pressure sensors, to adjust to your new position. It ensures your brain receives adequate blood flow when you finally stand. It prevents orthostatic hypotension and the potentially fatal consequences that can follow. Step 4, the activation minute, 3 to 4. Still sitting on the edge of the bed, use this minute to gently wake up your muscles that have been inactive during sleep. Slowly turn your head side to side, gently stretching your neck. Lift your shoulders toward your ears. Hold for 2 seconds, then relax them down. Reach your arms above your head and stretch gently. Do slow side stretches, leaning gently to the left, then to the right. These gentle movements send oxygenated blood to muscles that were dormant during sleep. They prepare your body for activity in a gradual, safe way that respects your cardiovascular system's need for gentle transitions. Step 5, the transition minute, 4 to 5. Finally, after 4 full minutes of preparation, stand up slowly, not quickly, slowly. Pause for a few seconds while standing to ensure there's no dizziness, no lightheadedness, no visual disturbances. If you feel anything unusual, sit back down and wait another minute. Then walk slowly toward the bathroom or kitchen. Don't run, don't rush, don't check your phone while walking. Give your full attention to this transition. You've now made a gradual, respectful, safe transition from rest to activity. You've worked with your cardiovascular system instead of against it. The cumulative risk, why these mistakes stack. Each of these 5 mistakes is dangerous on its own, but when they're combined in the same morning routine, the risk multiplies exponentially. Example scenario, a person jumps out of bed immediately, mistake number 1, while dehydrated, mistake number 2, drinks strong coffee on an empty stomach, mistake number 3, and then takes an ice-cold shower, mistake number 5. In this scenario, blood pressure spikes from the sudden standing and the cold shock simultaneously, heart rate surges from the caffeine and the sympathetic nervous system activation. Blood is thick and sticky from dehydration. Coronary arteries are constricted from the cold. Oxygen demand is massively elevated while supply may be limited. This is the perfect cardiovascular storm. Each mistake amplifies the others. The whole becomes far greater than the sum of its parts. The research on circadian cardiology. The emerging field of circadian cardiology has documented the specific timing of cardiovascular events. Myocardial infarction, 40% higher risk in the morning. Sudden cardiac death, 29% higher risk in the morning. Stroke, 49% higher risk in the morning. Ventricular arrhythmias, peak incidence between 6 a.m. and noon. These patterns are driven by the morning surge in blood pressure, heart rate, and sympathetic nervous system activity. Understanding these rhythms is the foundation of prevention. The prevention mindset. Prevention is the greatest act of love you can perform for yourself and for the people who depend on you. For the people who would be devastated if they lost you to something completely preventable. The transition from sleep to wakefulness is one of the most delicate, dangerous moments of the day for your cardiovascular system. Don't underestimate it just because it happens every single day. Don't wait for chest pain or a collapse or an ambulance before you take this seriously. Final summary: the 5 deadly morning mistakes. Jumping out of bed immediately causes orthostatic hypotension, reflex tachycardia, and potential arrhythmias. Not drinking water upon waking creates hemoconcentration, thick, sticky blood, and increased clotting risk. Drinking strong coffee on an empty stomach triggers caffeine shock, blood pressure spike, and cardiovascular hyperexcitability. Intense exercise in the first hours overloads a vulnerable system, increases oxygen demand, and risks ischemia. Cold water exposure immediately after waking causes massive vasoconstriction, extreme blood pressure spike, and oxygen demand crisis. The 5-minute morning protection protocol, awakening. Minute, stay lying down, practice controlled breathing. Hydration. Minute, sit up, drink 300 to 400 milliliters of room temperature water. Adjustment. Minute, stay seated, do ankle circles, let baroreceptors adjust. Activation. Minute, gentle stretching to wake up muscles. Transition minute, stand slowly, pause, then walk calmly. Key principles: gradual transitions are essential for aging cardiovascular systems. Hydration is non-negotiable before anything else. Respect the morning danger zone. Combine prevention with professional medical guidance. Medical disclaimer. Everything shared here is general educational information based on current published research in circadian cardiology, chronobiology, and cardiovascular prevention. It is not personal medical advice for your individual situation. If you have pre-existing medical conditions, diagnosed heart problems, high or low blood pressure, diabetes, a history of arrhythmias, or any chronic condition, consult your doctor before making significant changes to your morning routine. If you take medications regularly, especially cardiovascular medications like beta blockers, ACE inhibitors, diuretics, or blood thinners, these habit changes can interact with your drugs in ways that require dosage adjustments. This information is intended as a starting point for conversation with your healthcare provider, not as a definitive prescription that bypasses professional medical guidance. Not everyone who makes these mistakes will develop cardiovascular problems. Not everyone who corrects them will see immediate dramatic benefits. Health is complex and individual. But for people in higher risk categories, especially those over 60 with cardiovascular risk factors like high blood pressure, diabetes, high cholesterol, smoking history, or family history of heart disease, these small modifications can make a life or death difference. The key is to approach changes with common sense, moderation, and medical guidance when necessary. Subscribe for more evidence-based health information.